Hey, good Monday to you guys. How are you? I hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. Um, Mine was a little bit busy, but not too bad. Um, I want to take a minute to talk about a few things before we jump into today's D&D live stream. Those of you who know me through Facebook or just on a personal level know that I typically on June 5th and June 6th on Facebook, I would post a remembrance of D Day. I would go through and I would try and find um, photographs, short video clips, documents, and so on the internet, and I would share them chronologically to represent the timeline of the Normandy invasion as it unfolded. Ships preparing at Southampton, troops boarding, equipment being loaded in, paratroopers waiting next to their dropships in the south of England, and then as the day unfolded, posting up little bits of information, all that the world would know. And then, of course, photographs from Omaha Beach, from Utah, from Pointe de Hoc, stories, snippets, and just on through the day. And I didn't do that this year. Hello, James. Hello, Simile. I didn't do that this year because Facebook has become an awful, awful place as far as as far as generating and posting content. Last year, three of the photos that I posted that prominently featured injured or dead soldiers got flagged. Now I recognize that yes, that's a depiction of graphic violence, but it's not like I could post a picture from the thing of the alien creature from that movie tearing a person apart from the inside, or you know uh, I could post a picture of Chinese police brutalizing and arresting citizens of that nation, and it would be fine. Um, but yeah, three of the photos got flagged, uh, and I got flagged on Facebook a couple of times this past spring for once for posting a joke and once for saying something bad about the government of China. And I'm entirely certain that they probably would have put me on vacation again for reposting those photos. I am not going to continue to use Facebook to post up any content except the links to these videos and to live stream on them. And apparently, dual live streaming is a violation of Facebook's policy anyway. So if anyone ever gets wind of these dual streams that I do on YouTube and on Facebook at the same time, they'll completely delete my account. So if I ever go away one day and you're like, "Where's Bill?" you'll have to come find me on YouTube because I am in constant violation of their policy there. But I was not. I decided this year, rather than sharing and remembering, and it's important that we remember. There's so few veterans of the Second World War left with us still. Rather than sharing that remembrance on a platform which is anti-Western values and which is absolutely subservient to anti-Western and anti-American sentiments that I would refrain this year, because I didn't plan for it. I didn't have a good alternative where folks could see it. I'll make arrangements for next year. Next year I will absolutely post it up. And I didn't forget. And when I was going through Facebook setting up the stream for today, you know, it's like, oh, here's a reminder of what you posted back in 2014, and there's links to my Remembrance Day photos, and it made me a little sad at heart. It made me a little sad at heart because I wanted to. I was like, oh well, I can just do this here, and then I had to steel myself. No, these people making decisions about my remembering one of the most important historical events of the 20th century, and I would argue, at least on the Western Front, the most important event of the entire European theater of the Second World War. If I had clicked in after posting those photos and said, "Oh, you've been restricted for a week because this is hurtful imagery," I would have had an aneurysm. I would not have taken that very well. You know how they say if you try hard enough, you can get a hold of an actual person? The person at Facebook that I eventually got hold of would have had a really, really awful day courtesy of me. So I just avoided the whole nasty mess, and I said, no, I'm not going to put my remembrance of D-Day on the backs of people who hate my country. So I apologize if you follow me on Facebook and you look forward to that. Next year, be it a YouTube video, whether I do something. I actually have a blog site that I haven't used in years and years and years. Whether I do it there will be a proper remembrance. So I didn't forget, trust me. If you were waiting for that, know that I didn't forget. So I thank you for your patience there. And one other non-D&D related thing that I wanted to mention is my sister's husband, Ray, is currently having some very severe health issues, and so my thoughts and my prayers go out to him and my sister. They get the shout out today. Love you guys. Take care. So let's talk about some fun stuff today. Let us, viewers, cast our minds back to 1977. It's 1977. Put on your bell bottoms and your ugly brown rayon shirt with the antique car print on it, and let us talk about the release of the Monster Manual. You run down to your favorite hobby shop. Let's say it's D&G Toys, as this little price tag says. You've just seen Star Wars. You're all pumped up. You're all hyped. You're feeling imaginative, and you've been playing D&D for a couple of years now. And you think, man, today is the day. I'm gonna buy this new Monster Manual. I'm gonna check out this Monster Manual. And you get it home. And first of all, look at this tome. Man, and this is a copy from 77. This is my very rare, still in good condition, true first print. You get this bad boy home. First of all, you grab an errata sheet from the store owner, and you get this bad boy home and you start looking at the organization, and wow, look at all the monsters and all the treasures and everything and the illustrations. But something catches your eye. In this new stat block, we'll call it, as your eyes slide down the page, you notice, hey, wait a minute. Alignment. It doesn't say chaotic. It doesn't say lawful. It doesn't say neutral. Now it says lawful evil for Ogre Magi. Well, what's that about? Maybe there's something in the front of the book. So you page back to the front of the book. And under alignment, Gary tells us, shows the characteristic bent of a monster in law or chaos, good or evil, or towards neutral behavior, possibly modified by good or evil intent. It is important with regard to the general behavior of the monster when encountered. Okay. So obviously, big dumb animals like the Ankeg, he's neutral, you know. He doesn't have time for good or evil. Eat, dig, lay eggs. That's pretty much the Ankeg right there, right? Or the giant ant. Similarly, eat, dig, lay eggs. Obey the queen. So you start leafing through here, and you're taken in by several cool creatures, the expanded sections on psionics, like, ooh, what's that going to cover? Because remember, all of the AD&D rules are not out yet. You've got to wait. You've got to wait 2 more years to have a complete set of AD&D rules. And then we come to the Sioux monster. The Sioux monster's alignment is merely listed as chaotic. Good, neutral, evil. It's not stated. But that's okay. Maybe that's a typo. So let's leaf around a little bit more. Oh, I know. Let's take a look at the Lich. Let's see the fully statted out Lich. Alignment neutral, but with evil in parens next to it. Now, we did go over this on Friday, and we did talk about how the Monster Manual really hewed to 5 alignments, not 9. So this is very much, the Monster Manual is very much in line with original Dungeons & Dragons and the introductory set of Dungeons & Dragons edited by J. Eric Holmes. 5 alignments, not 9. There's no chaotic neutral or lawful neutral or neutral good or neutral evil. There's simply lawful good, lawful evil, chaotic good, chaotic evil, and neutral. So it kind of fits in with your OD&D game, and it's perfectly usable with original Dungeons & Dragons. Indeed, you'll note that the lowest armor class in the book is armor class 9, not AC 10, as AD&D has it. But we'll talk about armor classes another time. So you use this for a while, and it's a great volume to have. It gives you a taste of what AD&D will be, and it lends some flavor and some meat, if you will, to your OD&D game. Time passes, and you hear about the release of the Player's Handbook. So the Player's Handbook comes out, and this is just like a 4th plus here. This is not one of my true firsts. The Player's Handbook comes out. So how do we make a character? And if you're following original Dungeons & Dragons, you're still doing 3d6 down the line. So some of these classes might just be pure unobtainium. And we won't go into character gen types. Maybe we'll do that in another video. But you create your character, however you do it, and then you get over to page 33, alignment. Well, I'm only playing a fighter. I'm not being a paladin or a ranger, which requires some type of good character. Let's get over to page 33. Of course I did. And look at alignment. Whoa, wait a second. There's more than 5 alignments listed here. Now there's a whole raft of alignments. And a note on changing alignment, which I'll get to in a second. And just for brevity's sake, I'll focus strictly on the new alignments, if you will. Because we have chaotic evil and chaotic good. But now, good adventurer, we have chaotic neutral. Above respect for life and good, or disregard for life and promotion of evil, the chaotic neutral places randomness and disorder. Good and evil are complementary balance arms. Neither are preferred, nor must either prevail, for ultimate chaos would then suffer. That's interesting. And then we have lawful good and lawful evil. But now, there's lawful neutral. Those of this alignment view regulation as all-important, taking a middle road betwixt evil and good. This is because the ultimate harmony of the world, and of the whole of the universe, is considered by lawful neutral creatures to have its sole hope rest in law and order. Evil or good are immaterial beside the determined purpose of bringing all to predictability and regulation. And then right below that, neutral evil. The neutral evil creature views law and order as unnecessary considerations, for pure evil is all in all. Either might be used, but both are disdained as foolish clutter in eventually bringing maximum evilness to the world. Neutral evil is the evilest evil. But then we have its antithesis, neutral good, the goodest good. Unlike those directly opposite them, neutral evil, in alignment, creatures of neutral good believe that there must be some regulation in combination with freedoms if the best is to be brought to the world, the most beneficial conditions for living things in general and intelligent creatures in particular. By the way, this is the only good alignment that thieves can play. So if you're playing a thief and you want to be a sort of Robin Hood type, that's your only option. If your DM is strictly by the book, as he or she should be. So now we have these 4 new alignments in play. The shores of Dungeons and Dragons have expanded, the fog is lifted a bit, and you can see out into a broader sea of role-playing opportunities. And then on the next page, you might find yourself wondering, oh, well, what if my paladin falls? What if my thief decides to stop thieving and, wishes to change alignment? While involuntary change of alignment is quite possible, it is very difficult for a character to voluntarily switch from one to the other, except within limited areas. Evil alignment can be varied along like axes. The neutral character can opt for some more specific alignment. Your referee will probably require certain stringent sacrifices and appropriate acts, possibly a quest as well, for any other voluntary alignment change. In fact, even axial change with an evil or good, or radial movement from neutrality may require strong proofs of various sorts. Further voluntary change will be even more difficult. Changing back to a Forsaken alignment is next to impossible on a voluntary basis, even if involuntary drift will bring the necessity of great penance. So yeah, you can't just switch alignments willy-nilly. At least if your DM is worth their salt. So now alignment has expanded out. And there's a mention here from Gary. Naturally, there are variations and shades of tendencies within each alignment. The description are generalizations only. A character can be basically good in its true neutrality or tend towards evil. It is probable that your campaign referee will keep a graph of the drift of your character on the alignment chart. This is affected by the actions and desires of your character during the course of each adventure and will be reflected on the graph. You may find that these actions are such as to cause declared alignment to be shifted towards or actually to some other. So your character alignment could be changed, whether you might want it to or not. But the interesting thing is Gary's mentioning that alignment was a general consideration. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that further on towards the end. Just to talk about current year and modern times. Hello, Cam 1138. So, as a player, or even as a dungeon master, you're now outfitted and you understand the alignments. And I want to take just a quick detour to mention something, and that's alignment language, something that gets scoffed at a lot by younger players who don't understand the nature of alignment languages. An alignment language is not a spoken, writable language. You won't find a book written in lawful good, Librams and tomes aside, or neutral evil, or chaotic neutral, or whatever. An alignment language is limited to a few gestures, maybe a catechism, maybe just a specific kind of handshake, a very highly limited syntax with which you can communicate intent and ideals, or maybe even yes and no, or I need aid, or can I aid you? An alignment language saying, oh, my character speaks lawful good, I'll meet another character and ask them in lawful good if they're lawful good, and then we'll carry on a conversation that in this weird tongue that no one else can speak. It's kept very under the table. And it's admonished in the player's handbook and again in the Dungeon Master's Guide that characters don't go around asking each other their alignment. That's a deeply personal thing. That's, I mean, think how odd it would be if you were having a conversation, say to, just over dinner, and someone leans in and says, so what are your ethos? Or asks you, just out of the blue asks you about your religious point of view or something like that. There really and truly is no modern analog, with the possible exception of a Freemason handshake or similar private society type greeting to an alignment language. But an alignment language, regardless of whether you're using 3 alignments but also have alignment languages, or 9 alignments and have 9 alignment languages, is not a it's not a conversational language. A book about a given order that you might be a part of might have a section of it which has a few ideograms, a few pictographs, which are in an alignment language mode, you know, a series of lines or something like that, that a person perusing the book might look at and not even understand because no explanation is given. But, you know, a neutral good person might pick the tome up and realize, okay, I see what you're going after here. So that's the note on alignment languages. So you've established alignment in the Monster Manual, 5 alignments, but now it's been expanded in the Player's Handbook. You'll have to wait almost an entire year as a dungeon master. As a player, you're golden. You can be hitting your DM with these rules. You're like, hey, look, no, it's all explained here. Psionics are in here. All the new spells are described in here. All the new classes, everything and how it works is described in here. You as a dungeon master are beleaguered because you don't have a volume to help you out until late in 1978, spring of 78, in fact, when the Dungeon Master's Guide hits. Now you've got, in nearly twice the thickness, a weapon to deal with all those pesky players. So let's take a look. And this is just like a 7th print or something like that. This is not anything too special. Well, I mean, I have David S. LaForce autograph and sketch in the cover, Jim Ward's autograph, Darlene Peekle's autograph, Gary Gygax, Errol Otis. So this one is kind of special. Sorry, I just had to do that. So, over on page 24. Now, by this point, the DM and players are probably to grips with the idea of alignments. But this book really puts the ball in the DM's court. Cam says, it really would have been wild to get things in the order they were published with the delays. Yeah. Although I will say that very early, Dragon Magazine number 22, and I have a copy, I maybe should have had that handy, but Dragon 22 came out in February of 78, and it actually has all the combat resolution, psionics resolution, all the charts, basically the ultra critical stuff to run AD&D by the book is in Dragon Magazine. So you might have gotten a little bit of relief, a little bit of succor, but yeah, it would have been crazy to try and run an AD&D game with the books trickling in over the space of nearly 3 years. All right, so let me read this to you from Alignment, and this is on page 23 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. Alignment describes the broad ethos of thinking, reasoning creatures, those unintelligent being placed within the neutral area because they are totally uncaring. Note that alignment does not necessarily dictate religious persuasion, although many religious beliefs will dictate alignment. As explained under alignment languages, QV, this aspect of alignment is not the major consideration. The overall behavior of the character or creature is delineated by alignment. In the case of the player characters, behavior determines actual alignment. Or in the case of it. Therefore, besides defining the general tendencies of creatures, it also groups creatures into mutually acceptable or at least non-hostile divisions. This is not to say that groups of similarly aligned creatures cannot be opposed or even mortal enemies. 2 nations, for example, with rulers of lawful good alignment can be at war. Bands of orcs can hate each other, but the former would possibly cease their war to oppose a mass invasion of orcs, just as the latter would make common cause against the lawful good men. Thus, alignment describes the worldview of creatures and helps to define
what their actions, reactions, and purposes will be. It likewise causes a player character to choose an ethos which is appropriate to his or her profession, and alignment also aids players in the definition and role approach of their respective game personae. With the usefulness of alignment determined, definition of the divisions is necessary. And then there's the major divisions: law and chaos, good and evil. Now we get an expanded, not expanded like if you only have the player's handbook, you're missing something. Indeed, this is just the alignment section in the player's handbook rephrased. But Gary goes on to explain the axes of law and good. The opposition here is between law and chaos, rather. I said law and good. Between law and chaos. The opposition here between organized groups and individuals. That is, law dictates that order and organization are necessary and desirable, while chaos holds to the opposite view. Law generally supports the group as more important than the individual, while chaos promotes the individual over the group. All right? Good and evil. Basically stated, the tenets of good are human rights, or in the case of AD&D, creature rights. Each creature is entitled to life, relative freedom, and the prospect of happiness. Cruelty and suffering are undesirable. Evil, on the other hand, does not concern itself with rights or happiness. Purpose is the determinant. There can never exist a lawful chaos or an evil good. These and their reverses are dichotomous. This is not to say they cannot exist in the same character or creature if it is insane or controlled by another entity, but as a general division they are mutually exclusive pairs. Consider also the radically opposed alignments are lawful neutral, chaotic neutral, neutral good, neutral evil, lawful good, chaotic evil, and lawful evil, chaotic good. Lawful groups might, for example, combine to put down some chaotic threat, for example, just as readily as good groups would combine to suppress some powerful evil. Basic understanding and agreement, however, is within the general specific alignment, i.e. one of the 9 categories. These are described as follows. And then Gary goes on and describes each of the alignments, giving more, or even more, I should say, backbone to the alignment descriptions. Now, here, interestingly enough, on page 24, if you guys remember the wheel, the grid that I showed you of how alignments were situated in the strategic review, he goes over graphing the alignments here. As I said, within the player's handbook, the DM will keep a graph. Here he explains how to keep the graph. He goes further into explaining alignment language. And just to give you guys a quick blush of that, alignment language is a handy game tool which is not unjustifiable in real terms. Thieves did employ a special cant. Secret organizations and societies did and do have certain recognition signs, signals, and recognition phrases, possibly special languages of limited extent as well. Consider also the medieval Catholic Church, which used Latin as a common recognition and communication base to cut across all national boundaries. In AD&D, alignment languages are the special set of signs, signals, gestures, and words which intelligent creatures use to inform other intelligent creatures of the same alignment of their fellowship and common ethos. Alignment languages are never flaunted in public. They are not used as salutations or interrogations if the speaker is uncertain of the alignment of those addressed. Furthermore, alignment languages are a limited vocabulary and deal with the ethos of the alignment in general, so lengthy discussion of varying subjects cannot be discussed in such tongues. So when people laugh and say, "Oh, I'm going to write a book in lawful good," just remind them, no, you're not. And The removal of alignment languages as D&D progressed was a poor design decision. And Gary talks at length about alignment language, concluding by saying alignment language is used to establish credentials only after initial communications have been established by other means. Only in the most desperate of situations would any creature utter something in the alignment tongue otherwise. So there you go. Alignment language is something you're going to keep very close to you. And then under changing alignment, there are serious repercussions for just saying, oh, I'm going to stop being good and I'm going to be evil. You're going to run into serious problems. For example, Gary says, a glance at the alignment chart will show that radical alignment change is impossible without magical means. If one is chaotic good, it is possible to change to neutral good or chaotic neutral only, depending upon desire and or actions. From the absolute neutral alignment, one can only move to some neutral-based alignment. The representation of the fact that the character must divorce himself or herself from certain precepts and views and wholeheartedly embrace the other set of values in human nature is such that without radical personality alteration, such as caused by insanity or magic in the case of this game, such transition must be gradual. So you're not going to have a character just shift gears and suddenly, like, I'm lawful good, I'm chaotic evil. That's, you know. Now, there are certain magics. The Helm of Opposite Align, for example, you throw that on the chaotic evil thief's head and suddenly you've got a lawful good, I would say, fighter, you know. Or maybe even someone who gives up any profession, whatever, of being an adventurer, devotes himself wholly to the community and giving back. Paul says, alignment languages are common signs and gestures used to break down barriers and communicate across cultures. Never use them in public. I wonder why kids trying to learn this threw that idea out. I don't know, Paul. I don't know. So, in 3 AD&D volumes, we see alignment go from 5, lawful good, lawful evil, neutral, chaotic good, chaotic evil, to 9, we have the precept of alignment language introduced, and then we have the alignment's definitions expanded on in the Dungeon Master's Guide. But the important thing to remember is what Gary said about the general coloration of a character's behavior by alignment. And the shoe that is going to drop, we will come to in a moment. Now, let's say you took a look at Advanced Dungeons and Dragons and decided that it was a bunch of dross, that it wasn't your game. Well, I can't help you there. But TSR could. Because in 1980, TSR released Basic Dungeons and Dragons. It hewed more to original Dungeons and Dragons, and I meant to have the books over here, but you guys know what the basic D&D books look like. They had those wonderful cover illustrations by Errol Otis. One was kind of a reddish sort of well, it was red, but a lot of people's boxes faded to like magenta. And then you had the blue, you had the expert Dungeons and Dragons. But in that set, they dropped the 9 alignment system and adhered strictly to the 3. There was not even a consideration of alignment blending in those. Alignment became somewhat unimportant in basic Dungeons and Dragons. And so it stayed on in that branch of D&D all the way to the end of its run with the Rules Cyclopedia. Now, personally, I think that was a mistake. I feel like at least the 5 alignment system should have been offered. Even I, as a kid, with a weird amalgam of rules that I had, a monster manual, a dungeon master's guide, and the 2 basic D&D sets, I felt like, okay, use the alignment from the dungeon master's guide in basic D&D. Have characters that are lawful good or neutral good or what have you. The monsters I tried to adjust as best I could, but I didn't. I felt like those were too limiting. Now you might wonder, you might ask, did alignments ever get used in another system? Or you might proclaim that, well, alignments were such a bad idea, Bill. As much as D&D got copied, no other system copied alignments. Untrue, I say. There is, as most things are in the Palladium role-playing system, there is a convoluted mess of alignment, which I'm not even going to touch on. If we ever do a deep dive on Robotech, which I might, we'll talk a little bit about its alignment system. But oh boy, did Kevin Simbada really... that boy went places, not college, but places, if you know what I'm saying about with alignment. So having established alignment in Dungeons and Dragons from all the way back in Chainmail. Remember, Gary invented alignment for gaming purposes. As I said, in 3 Hearts and 3 Lions and the Elric sagas and other fantasy works, having these ethical divisions and so on was established. But in terms of games, Gary invented alignment in Chainmail. He even gave swords alignment. I mean, because truly, Stormbringer was just straight up evil. I mean, as we found out later, Stormbringer was a demon in the form of a sword. There is your history. And I want to talk a little bit about something, and I don't want to spend too much fuel discussing this, but I do want to bring this up. For whatever reason, Hazards, that is Hasbro Wizards, they have been slowly rejecting alignment. Alignment has been defenestrated in many arenas. There was the case, and I can't remember if it was a late 3rd edition or whatever, but optionally anyone of any alignment could, as long as he hewed to some kind of an ethos, any playable creature, which is everything now, could be a paladin of something. Paladin is a very specific term in a very specific class, or at least it used to be. And the continued mutations and alterations of alignment show that the people who are currently in charge of Dungeons and Dragons don't get it at all. Now, I was never... I know this is going to sound strange coming from an old school guy, because a lot of people of my gaming age fondly remember I6 Ravenloft. I never cared for Ravenloft. Just the whole mishmash of Universal's monsters into D&D just left me very meh. I mean, sure, vampires showing up every now and again, they're a nice meaty threat to throw against players, but a haunted castle with zombies and a ridiculous Renfield-like creature, and a village terrorized by the castle up on the hill, just held zero appeal to me. So I don't Ravenloft, and I didn't Ravenloft back in the day. It got its own campaign setting. It got its own separate game for a little while. White Wolf was putting out its sword and sorcery line with Ravenloft was in their charge for some time. So I guess there's a new Ravenloft out, and it's not just vampires and zombies and werewolves and flesh golems, aka Frankenstein monsters, anymore. They're rewriting a giant swathe of D&D lore and history, and 5e can't hurt me. Okay, I understand. There is as much distance between myself and 5e as there is between myself and, say, Pripyat, Ukraine. But just as within my very bones themselves, I have radioactive particles from the Chernobyl meltdown, there are little particles of 5e Ravenloft that have that have contaminated the thinking of some. And it bugs me to no end that even within the constraints of what should be a fairly cut and dried system, Wizards of the Coast has completely misunderstood and thrown out the alignment system. I honestly don't think, other than for geek cred of looking good on a bookshelf, anyone at Wizards of the Coast has first edition books or understands them. Okay? Honestly, if for whatever reason this ever got to Mike Merles, Mike, you and your team don't understand the history of Dungeons and Dragons. You don't. And this new Ravenloft product proves that I'm right that you don't. Because if you did, you would have kept your greasy fingers off of alignment altogether. The system of alignment, the hows and whys of how it functions in D&D, and its history as I've explained it, are reason enough for its continued existence. It is a core tenet of D&D. I understand that the function of the people who currently control the fate of Dungeons and Dragons is to rip it apart, to gut it, to leave it with no history. To say, those were the bad old times. Back in those days when there was a chance that not everyone would win, that there was a chance that not everyone would have that epic moment in the game, and by in the game I mean right then, right there, in every encounter. It's not enough for the thief player to say, I'm gonna wait till this fight is over, then I'm gonna move into the chamber and search for traps and search for secret doors and pick locks and maybe pocket a little bit of treasure. I'm losing viewers. It's everyone must be special at all times, and alignment gets in the way of that. Having to pick an ethos, having to pick a way for your character to generally act apparently is bad. So we're at where we're at now. The reason the reason I wanted to explain the history of alignment was so that perhaps some of the folks who watch the channel, who maybe third edition was their first D&D, which doesn't really, I mean, I gotta hand it to Wizards of the Coast, because with 5th edition they've actually made me nostalgic for 3rd edition. I actually look on 3rd edition as a foundational concrete thing, compared to 5e's shifting sands. But saying, oh well, any alignments are too restrictive, and it shows that you don't understand D&D. You don't want D&D. You want the name Dungeons and Dragons to sell whatever screwed up neo fantasy approach to gaming that you've created, because you know that what you're doing couldn't stand on its own merits. So take Dungeons and Dragons, hollow it out completely, hollow it out, leave only a paper thin shell that just says Dungeons and Dragons on it, and then stuff it full of these crazy notions. And in part of the hollowing out is ripping out alignment and throwing it away. It doesn't matter what you do. You're not responsible for your actions from moment to moment. You don't have to worry about an ethos. It really is reflective of the times. It really is reflective of the times. Just, just do your own thing minute to minute. You don't have to listen. You don't have to wait. You don't have to delay gratification. So that's why I wanted to discuss alignment and its history and reiterate its importance in your game. If you're out there, if you're playing 2nd edition, 3rd edition, or even some variant of basic Dungeons and Dragons, and you've wondered about alignments and where they come from and why they're important, I hope this has helped you out. I hope this has helped you apprehend that. And even if you're playing and enjoying 5th edition, please don't listen to what they're saying in the new Ravenloft supplement. All right, 5th edition started out with a lot of promise, but if you're going to just throw alignment away, then the next thing they'll move on are stats. The game is rapidly sliding towards being a story narration game where just we pass the talking stick around and somebody says, my character's super cool and slays the dragon with one blow. Yay! That's where D&D is headed. And that's the beginning of it. And I hope you understand that D&D is a lot cooler with alignments than without. I'm going to catch up on some of these comments here on YouTube. Let's see. I think I touched on this already, but Paul says, alignment languages are used as common signs and gestures to break down barriers and used to communicate across cultures. Never use them in public. I wonder what kids trying to learn this through the idea out. Well, your guess is as good as mine, Paul. Chris says, most of the rule changes across edition were because people making the changes didn't read the rule being changed in the first place. Got rid of most of my house rules after reading the DMG when I was older. Same. Exactly the same, Chris. If you really read the Dungeon Master's Guide, if you really, 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 truly read the Dungeon Master's Guide, you will find you do not need 99% of house rules. You don't. You really, really don't. Cam 1138 says restrictions are seen as a personal affront. Yeah, being told you have to wait or you can't do something is a no-no. Chris says, people complain about PCs of all alignments becoming murder hobos. I'm sure just getting rid of alignment will put a stop. Sure, yeah, absolutely. You know, if we throw out the need for a paladin to be lawful good, I'm sure everyone who gets the stack of abilities that paladins have, and apparently you can just be a paladin now by waving your hands and saying, hey, I'm a paladin. I'm sure they won't, the paladin players won't issue their ethos when it's convenient, just to get a little more power and glory. Paul said, Jim Ward said that deep down Gary wanted D&D to be about good triumphing over evil. Classic concept. You're damn right. You know, and I'm glad you bring that up, because Jim Ward and I have touched on that. When I spoke with him, and the somewhat humorous discussion, because this was many months ago when Wizards decided that saying all orcs were evil was bad because something racist something, which again, I've got to reiterate, if you look at an orc and say, oh, you can't represent black people like that, if you look at an orc and think that's supposed to be a black person, you're the racist. Okay, you are the racist, not me, for having orcs and be evil in my game. But you know, when Jim and I were talking about that, yes, D&D is very much about good versus evil and good triumphing over evil. What is good that it doesn't have evil to tilt at? Similarly, I never knew about any of this stuff. And similarly, you're exactly the prime audience for this. I'm glad it's I'm glad that I'm able to bring you this info. Paul says, I'm baffled by alignment language. Gets my brain all twisted up. Feel free to... You're not baffled by it. I think you get it. Alignment language is... it's my phone ringing off the hook over there. Alignment language is very much a Paul, are you a fan of baseball at all? Do you ever watch like the you know, the team manager will, but here's a better one, between the pitcher and the catcher, you know, you'll see like the pitcher will be down there and he'll, you know, and then the catcher will, or the pitcher, you know, and then he'll go like, okay, nobody knows that. That is, we'll say, Atlanta Braves language. Nobody speaks Atlanta Braves language except for Atlanta Braves aligned players. They can't sit there and, you know, there's no hand gestures in that for, hey, how's your wife doing? You mentioned the other day in the dugout she had to, you know, she had to go to the doctor. You know, she wasn't at the game. You know, and the pitcher's not over there like, you know, making signs for she's fine, just to check up. She's been having these headaches. It's literally just a way of communicating simple concepts back and forth to one another. Or here's an even better sign is in Band of Brothers. If you've seen the miniseries Band of Brothers, there's a bit in the Breakcore Manor gun assault mission when like 19 members of Easy Company took out like 135 Panzer Grenadiers and their artillery positions. When they're creeping up on the Germans, Neil McDonough's character, he looks at the two men that are following and proceeds to go through this jive with his hands. And they're following it completely. He's saying, I want you to shoot that one. I'm going to shoot that one. You're going to shoot that one. We're going to fire all together on a 3 count or something like that. That's an alignment language only spoken by American Airborne Rangers in the 509th Parachute Infantry Regiment, Easy Company. They have those hand gestures that are specific to them, and because they didn't want to yell back and forth. Does that kind of help you understand alignment languages a little bit better? They couldn't say, oh man, that landing sure was rough. Yeah, but the French civilians have been pretty nice. Hey, I found an old apple tree on the way here, and I've got some apples in my musette bag. We should enjoy those after this. That's not a discussion that they can have with, see those guys over there? We're going to throw grenades on 3, you there, you there, you there. That's an alignment language. It is a utilitarian communication system. They might have 1 or 2 spoken words in it. I may be getting defensive on behalf of thieves can't and stubbornly believing only rogues can have a signal language. Respectfully agree to disagree on that one. Gary mentions thieves can't, and thieves can't is something that thieves do get in D&D. But there are real-world examples of other languages. My father was a Freemason, and I remember him explaining to me there were handshakes and gestures and everything else that only other Freemasons know. My mom was in the OES. I don't really want to call it a ladies' auxiliary to the Freemasons, because it was their own society, but same thing, similar thing. Another great example for languages like that in Dune. Yeah, it's been a while since I've read Dune, but yeah. James says, I was about to say it's like hand signals used by military squads infiltrating a building or whatever. Yeah, it basically is. It's Rangers can't, if you will. It is Rangers' ability to communicate back and forth, or soldiers' ability to communicate back and forth. But I will say this, Paul, thieves can't is, and for those of you who aren't familiar with can't in this term, it's not CAN''T, it's can't. It draws from the same Latin root of chant, to call, to speak, to chant, to sing, to enunciate. That unlike alignment languages, thieves can't has a lot more flexibility. You are able to have a discussion in thieves can't. Now it might sound like something completely different to people on the outside. But you could have, like, here's here's a half elf and a human sitting at a table in the tavern, and they're talking about pies. Do you know where there's some good pies? I've heard where there's some good pies. There's a good bakery just about 2 blocks away from here. Yeah? When are they open? Well, they're open in the hours. Does the baker have help? Yeah, the baker has a couple of assistants. Oh, that's good. Do they slice the pie for you, or do you have to slice it yourself? They slice the pie for you. Oh, that's good. It's delicious. Yeah, it's mostly apple pie. Oh, that's very nice. The discussion that they're actually having is about a gem cutter that's not in the city of Greyhawk, but is a couple of miles away. He has guards. He has several cut gems, and they're diamonds. So you can have a conversation, not even necessarily about thiefly things, just in Thieves' Cant. And Thieves' Cant can bridge other languages too. Because, like, you might speak Elvish, Orcish, and Human, and the thief you're talking to might only speak, Halfling, Gnome, and Dwarf. But if you're both thieves, you can communicate via Thieves' Cant, roughly. So that's is that helping with alignment language any, Paul? I hope that it is. I sincerely hope that it is. Oh, and for those of you who wondered, I literally just seconds ago I got a message from my sister. Her husband is going to be fine. It's just just a medication adjustment required, a heart situation. But anyway, thank you all for your well wishes. The different houses had their own signals and hand signs. That's correct. I seem to recall, Cam, and you can correct me if I'm misremembering, but when the Shutout Mapes met Jessica for the first time, didn't they exchange hand signs, hand gestures to know a little bit about each other's intent? That would be, if I'm remembering right, that would be a very good example of alignment language. Sorry, my butt's hurting. I had to move around a little bit. Recare 32. Oh, looks like I'm late. All right. Let's start over. So let's say you go out and you buy the Monster Manual, and it's 19. I'm just kidding. Recurve, I'm sorry. You can. I leave these live streams up so you can absolutely go and you can rewatch the whole thing, and you can catch it. You're quite welcome, Paul. The Bene Gesserit have all kinds of secret communications. I didn't even think of that. Yeah, the Bene Gesserit are a great example of alignment languages. Their ability to communicate. And I would say, if we're going to keep going down the D&D alignment languages in Dune, by which I mean the first book, not I've read the second and third Dune books, but the remainders I have not. And I read that first one written by Kevin Anderson and Brian Herbert. Didn't care for it that much. I mean, it was okay in a fan fiction kind of way, but it didn't really grab me the way Dune did. But you didn't have to delete that, Recurve. That's fine. But the Bene Gesserit had an alignment language, their signs and symbols and etc. And they did it. If you remember, in Dune you have the Missionaria Protectiva, that is priestesses who would go out and establish legends on certain planets on the off chance that a Bene Gesserit might find herself trapped on that planet, as Jessica and Paul did. The Missionaria Protectiva set up legends so if a Bene Gesserit ever gets stuck on your world, she's going to say and do this, and you'll know she's special. You should treat her as a saint. And it worked. It saved Paul and Jessica's lives, but the Fremen themselves, whereas the Bene Gesserit had an alignment language, small gestures, hand symbols, that sort of thing. The Fremen had thieves' cant. The Fremen had their own specific language of metaphor and insinuation that they could speak full conversations in front of strangers, and not give away any secrets. The Brian Herbert and Anderson ones were exactly like fan fiction by people who didn't understand the original material, as so much fan fiction is. I'm sorry, Mr. Herbert. I read the Herbert books until he changed Paul's history from having never left Caladan to running away with a circus and learning to hypnotize large audiences, making him a huckster. That sounds entertaining, not. So anyway, sorry, I was getting messages from people there. Read the oh yeah. Yeah, I can't really speak for that. I'm never going to read the Brian Herbert Dune books beyond the one that I read, which I think was just called House Atreides, and it dealt with the backstory behind a bunch of characters. Duncan Idaho being imprisoned by the Harkonnen as a child, etc. But anyway, kind of wandering far afield. Do you guys have any questions now about alignments, now that we've discussed its history? I would surely like to know your thoughts and opinions on this. But I think we've had a good engagement. And I greatly appreciate it. It got worse. They obliterated the entire mythology. Yeah. Well, the second and third Dune books were no great shakes. I mean, where do you go from Dune? There's only downhill from there. And, like, even Tolkien knew when to quit it. Like, he actually worked, he had like a page of notes that he discussed about, basically as a sequel, The New Shadow. And he said of The New Shadow, he said, I worked on it for a while. I could never come up with something satisfying. And at the end of the day, I realized the whole concept was boring and depressing. Young knights dressing up as orcs and pretending to threaten Gondor, basically circling around and coming out of the mountains of shadow and pretending to threaten Gondor. And I realized just how terrible an idea that was. So I didn't do anything with it. That's, I kind of wish Herbert had realized that Dune was the pinnacle of the Dune universe. See, that dovetails nicely back into D&D and alignments and what they've done with Drow elves, um, in that stupid Ravenloft thing. Now, what are they doing now? It's Drow, as we've understood them for the last 40 years, are only a tiny cult. That the vast majority of Drow are good and they're pale skinned, just like their kin. So, in other words, they're normal elves. They're normal elves that don't live underground and don't worship Loth. So, elves. Again, just like gutting Dungeons and Dragons of everything that makes it Dungeons and Dragons and slapping your own stuff inside just because you want the D&D name, you want the cool Drow lore with none of the disadvantages. So yeah, dark-skinned Drow, obsidian black Drow, we'll call them. Obsidian black Drow are a tiny, tiny, tiny cult, and the majority of Drow are good. Not that we need to assign alignments to things. Tolkien knew how not to undercut his own story. Yes. Tolkien. I think Christopher Tolkien's heart was in the right place, compiling his father's notes into the Silmarillion. And by the way, we're kind of weaving all over the place, and it's getting late in the hour, but I'm sorry, not Tolkien. Christopher Tolkien, in creating the Silmarillion, a lot of people think the Silmarillion's a difficult read, and that nobody reads it so much. The Silmarillion is a very easy read. It's a lot easier. Literally, once you get past the book of Genesis for the Silmarillion, it's really easy to read. It's in these bite-sized, easily digestible chunks, and there's adventurous stuff happening in there. So do give the Silmarillion a try, but I think later, like the multi-volume War of the Ring sets and so on, that I think Chris Tolkien was doing the best he could to keep the legacy alive. Paul says, alignment matters. Role-playing is improv, and with rules and prompts to keep the ball rolling. If everybody is playing a character without values, it becomes random nonsense. Exactly. Paul, you get it. You understand. Chris says, why change Drow that way? That's like saying the majority of aquatic elves actually live in the woods and look like regular elves, and the water-breathing ones are in the minority. Yeah, it really does. It's because they want it's for two reasons. They want a cool thing. These are people who, when they were 10 and 11 years old, were plowing through stacks of Drizzt Do'Urden novels. That had belonged to their parents or probably their grandparents, some of these people. And they wanted all the cool things. Yeah, Drow are cool. Drow elves are cool, man. But they don't want any of the bad things that come along with it. Good Drow are viewed as insane and killed or driven out of Eri Sinlu. If you read, if you understood, not you guys, if they understood D2 and 3, they would understand there are good Drow, and they're in a bad situation. Groups of rakes who see no good in their society, who, if approached in a friendly manner, will help the party. They're outcasts and they are hunted by the drow. There have always been good drow in D&D. Bunch of morons. But they wanted all the good and none of the bad. And the other reason, if you will, is once again because of that screwed up, so woke you go back around to becoming racist mindset of theirs, where they say, oh, those are black people. How could you treat black people? They're not people, and they're not black in the sense that they're heavily melanated. Their skin is obsidian colored. They are photo negatives of actual elves. It's everything flipped over. Gary no more had Africans in mind for drow elves than J.R.R. Tolkien had Africans in mind when he created orcs. So, but their own sense of virtue signaling, their own demand that the past be erased, makes them do this. So that's why. That's the answer. Cam says, listening on audiobook is a great first pass. If reading it is too hard for some readers, then you can read it at leisure. Similarly says, you can't talk people back to sanity. No, you can't. No, you cannot. I just, I hate getting up because invariably YouTube will decide to make the shot of my studio space empty as the thumbnail, or like me standing up and you can see like this part of me. But I am going to get up and I am going to go get my copy of Descent into the Depths and Vault of the Drow, because I want you guys to hear something. Those of you who may not have these modules, I want you to hear something. Hang on a second. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. So, here we have one of my favorite D&D modules, Vault of the Drow, with this great cover art. I got this autographed by Mr. Errol Otis. I love this cover piece. I don't know if it has a title, but I call this one "Stop Struggling Human. You're only making things kinkier on yourself." I just want to read something to you about those all bad drow that mean old Gary Gygax created. Let's see. So this is on page 16 if you get the multicolored. I don't think there was ever a pastel version of this. I know D1 and D2 are pastel. Maybe D3. Maybe there's a mono D3. I'll have to go back and check. But here, this is on page 16 of this particular volume. Roaming the streets in airy Sinlu are bands of bitter youths, often outcast. The band will be composed of either drow, drow elves and half drow, human cross, or drow, half drow, and 1 to 2 half orcs. The former sort of group is 40% likely, the latter 60%. Drow crosses will have magic resistance equal to their dark elven heritage, but no spell ability. The bands with the elven drow members will be hostile to all they perceive as part of the system which prevails in the world, and the dark elves with them are of the few who are neither totally degenerate nor wholly evil. They are haters of the society around them and see no good in it. If the party manages a friendly meeting with a group of drow, drow elves, or half-drow rakes, the youths will tell them about the worship of the demoness Loth and the way to her egg. The rakes will accompany the party to the area in question if a plan which seems reasonable to them is put forth. They will also leave the vault egg areas in the course of adventuring. Good drow. Good drow in drow society. But unfortunately, Simile is right. You can't talk people back to sanity. You can't. You can't convince people no matter how hard you try. So, I don't know what to tell you guys. Wizards of the Coast is never going to wake up one day and say that, you know, that Gary did anything good. They're just not. Well, I certainly have had a lot of fun on this deep dive about alignment today. I feel like I've learned a lot. I hope you guys have learned a lot. And tomorrow, we're going to dig in a little bit more, I think, into some D&D talk, to some hobby talk. And we'll just have to see what that is, won't we? But I'll be back. I'll be doing a live stream tomorrow, 12:30. Wednesday, I don't know if Kyle is still indisposed. I'll have to reach out to him. But I'll do something Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday midday, or just depending on how that evolves. And then I should also be streaming with Jayashiro Finney Wednesday night, or whatever the hour is, wherever you are. When Ashiro streams on Wednesday, I will be there also. Thursday, I don't know. We'll have to see about Thursday and Friday. I mean, I'll definitely be streaming, but what it'll be, we'll just advance as the week does. But with that said, thank you all and everyone for stopping by and enjoying the stream. Thank you, everybody, for the great comments in the live. This has been one of the livelier live streams I've had. This just goes on for pages. And as always, and especially to Recurve 32, yes, the stream will be up forever, so you can go back and watch it from the beginning. If you have any questions about the stuff we discussed, put it down in the comments. I will see the comments. I see notifications on YouTube that people have made comments, and I will comment back on your comment. So, and don't be afraid to put a timestamp. If I've said something that doesn't make any sense or you have a question about and I don't remember it, it helps me if you timestamp it. But as always, please like, subscribe, click the bell icon. It helps a lot. And I will see you guys all tomorrow. Peace. Take care of yourselves.